All right, buckle up, folks, because we're about to dive into a topic that might just shake the foundations of what you think you know about the Bible. Imagine, if you will, that the Bible we're all familiar with is just the tip of the iceberg. What if there were secrets about creation, the lives of the patriarchs, even God's law, that have been hidden from us? Have you ever wondered why certain details in Genesis seem a little bit open-ended, or why the stories of the patriarchs seem to lack depth? Well, the answer might just lie in a forgotten book. Today, we're going to delve deep into a mysterious ancient text, the Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis. Preserved within the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, Jubilees claims to fill in those gaps, revealing hidden stories and providing deeper insight into God's divine plan. It asserts that it holds crucial details that were left out of the familiar Bible that we know. But here's the kicker. This book has been excluded from most Christian versions of the Bible. Why would a text that claims to shed light on our very origins be pushed to the side? In today's video, we're going to explore all 50 chapters of Jubilees and delve into the reasons why it's not considered part of the canonical Christian Bible. We'll uncover lost details of the Genesis story, explore its unique cosmology of angels, sacred time, and hidden commandments passed down to humanity. Jubilees isn't just a simple retelling of the Genesis story. It also presents a detailed system of laws, emphasizing the importance of adhering to the solar calendar, a calendar that it claims was ordained by God Himself. It even asserts that the calendar that most of the world follows is wrong, going against divine timekeeping. This begs the question, is it possible that these bold claims are what led to Jubilees being rejected by early religious leaders? Could the lost details it provides contradict established interpretations of the Bible? From a scholarly perspective, Jubilees is incredibly interesting because it offers a glimpse into the worldview of some Jews during the Second Temple period. It shows how they understood Genesis, the law, and Israel's role in God's plan. It also shows the influence of contemporary folklore and mythology on religious thought. However, it's crucial to approach Jubilees with caution. It's not simply a neutral text. It's a document with its own agenda. It was written to promote a specific understanding of the law and the calendar, and it may have been used to reinforce the power of a particular group within Jewish society. So why was this ancient book rejected by the early church? What secrets does it hold that were deemed too controversial for Orthodox Christianity? Does it genuinely contain lost insights into creation and God's law? Or is it simply a different interpretation of familiar stories, driven by a specific ideology? We're going to explore these questions together as we dive deeper into the Book of Jubilees. Get ready for a challenging journey, one where we'll have to confront difficult questions about the origins of faith and the authenticity of the scriptures that we know. So, join me as we explore and draw our own conclusions about the value and significance of this enigmatic book. What if I told you that the Bible we know might be missing crucial details about creation, the lives of the patriarchs, and even God's law? The Book of Jubilees, preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, claims to fill in those gaps, revealing hidden stories and adding deeper insight into God's divine plan. But there's a catch. This book has been banned from most of the Christian world. Why? In today's video, we're going to explore the mysterious Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis, and discover why its 50 chapters have been excluded from the canonical Christian Bible. This ancient text contains lost details about the Genesis story, offering us a cosmic glimpse into how angels, sacred time, and hidden commandments were passed down to humanity. But the book doesn't stop there. It even asserts that the calendar most of the world follows is wrong, and that God himself ordained a divine structure to time that few adhere to today. So, why was this ancient text rejected by the early church? What secrets does it hold that were deemed too controversial for Orthodox Christianity? The Book of Jubilees tells us that Adam was created on the sixth day, just like it's described in Genesis, but it adds a new layer to his story. According to Jubilees, after creating Adam, God gave him specific commandments right from the start, laws that included observing the Sabbath, laws of purification, and rules pertaining to marriage and worship. These laws, which were mediated by angels, were to be followed by Adam and his descendants as part of the covenant God made with humanity. While Genesis mentions God's direct interaction with Adam, Jubilees introduces angelic beings as mediators, teaching Adam how to follow God's commandments. These angels, particularly those known as the angels of the presence, ensured that Adam and Eve understood the laws of holiness, sacrifice, and morality. And on the sixth day of the second week, we brought it to Adam according to the word of the Lord, all the beasts, and all the cattle, and all the birds, and everything that moves on the earth, and everything that moves in the waters, according to their kinds, and according to their sorts, the beasts on the first day, and the cattle on the second day, and the birds on the third, and everything that moves on the earth on the fourth, and whatever moves in the waters on the fifth. Jubilees 3:1-2. This angelic interaction is meant to reinforce the idea that God's law wasn't just a human invention, but a part of the celestial order. The angels taught Adam that he had to observe God's laws as an eternal covenant, just as they observed similar laws in the heavenly realm. Is it possible that God's laws, mediated through angels, were given to humans long before Moses received the Ten Commandments? And what can we learn from these ancient laws? The Book of Jubilees begins by recounting the creation story that we know from Genesis, but it goes further than what most Bibles include. According to Jubilees, when God created the world, he didn't just bring life into existence, he also established the very structure of time, aligning it with his divine order. This is where the concept of sacred time comes in. Unlike the traditional calendars that most of us follow, the Book of Jubilees introduces a precise solar calendar overseen by heavenly angels, managing the universe's cosmic cycles. It's not just about counting days, it's about living in complete harmony with God's will. Jubilees claims that humanity is obligated to follow this sacred calendar, which consists of 364 days divided into 4 seasons, each exactly 91 days long. This structure ensures that holy days like the Sabbath and festivals always fall on the right day. It's a perfect system, but one that the rest of the world has forgotten. In the book of Genesis, the story starts with the creation of earth, but Jubilees gives us an even bigger picture. Before the world was formed, the angels were created on the first day of creation. These angels play a crucial role in managing the universe, including regulating time and the seasons. The Book of Jubilees reveals that these angels were assigned specific tasks by God, some overseeing natural phenomena, such as the movements of the heavens, and others serving as messengers and guardians of God's law. This idea of angels controlling the heavens is something we see in other ancient texts as well, but the Book of Jubilees emphasizes how these angelic beings help maintain order in the cosmos, ensuring that the sun, moon, and stars follow their divine paths. For he ordained the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for Sabbaths of years and for Jubilees and for all seasons of the years. Jubilees 2:9. These angels weren't just watching humanity. They controlled the very structure of time. And when humans no longer aligned with God's time, it would lead to chaos, a theme that plays a central role throughout the Book of Jubilees. One of the most controversial elements of the Book of Jubilees is its assertion that the world should follow the solar calendar, not the lunar calendar that many ancient cultures, including the Israelites, eventually adopted. According to Jubilees, the solar calendar is the only accurate way to measure time because it perfectly aligns with God's divine order. The book explains that the solar year consists of 364 days divided into a perfect 52 weeks with each season, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, containing exactly 13 weeks or 91 days. This system ensures that the Sabbath and other sacred festivals are always observed on the correct days each year. This solar calendar is strikingly similar to the Ethiopian calendar, which is still used today by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian year is divided into 13 months, 12 months of 30 days, with an additional month called Pagum, consisting of 5 or 6 days to make up the difference. Is it possible that the Ethiopian calendar is one of the few modern systems that still reflects the sacred time described in Jubilees? In contrast, the lunar calendar, which was adopted by many cultures in the ancient world, including the Israelites, is seen as a deviation from this divine order. The lunar calendar is irregular, causing months and festivals to shift over time, and Jubilees warns that this deviation from the solar calendar leads to spiritual disarray. There will be those who will assuredly observe the moon, but they will disturb the seasons and come beforehand an abominable day, the day of testimony, Jubilees 6:37. For Jubilees, following the lunar calendar is not just a mistake, it's a form of disobedience to God's will. The book suggests that by returning to the solar calendar, humanity can realign itself with the divine rhythms set into motion when the world was created. The Book of Jubilees reaffirms the traditional 6-day creation story found in Genesis, but it goes into more detail about the first Sabbath. According to Jubilees, God didn't just rest on the 7th day. He sanctified it as a divine institution, an eternal law that was given to both humans and angels. The Sabbath is seen as the foundation of time, a day that was set apart from the very beginning of creation and meant to be observed forever. The idea of the Sabbath as a cosmic principle is crucial in Jubilees. It doesn't just govern the weekly cycle, it's also tied to larger time structures, including the 49-year Jubilee cycle. These cycles were meant to bring the world back into harmony with God's order, offering a period of rest, release, and renewal for the land, the people, and even the angelic realm. For he sanctified the 7th day and blessed it for all ages as a sign of holiness for all his works. Jubilees 2:31. The emphasis on the Sabbath as an eternal law suggests that Jubilees is not just recounting the Genesis story, it's revealing the hidden meaning behind the time cycles that govern all of creation. After the fall of Adam and Eve, Jubilees adds new insight into the story of their sons, Cain and Abel. While Genesis tells us that Cain killed Abel, the Book of Jubilees provides additional details about the events that followed. Cain's murder of Abel is seen as the first major violation of God's laws, a sin that led to spiritual consequences for all of humanity. But while Cain was banished, Jubilees emphasizes that the righteous lineage of humanity continued through Seth, Adam's third son. In Jubilees, Seth is portrayed as a righteous figure who was taught to follow the laws mediated by angels. This sets the stage for the later descendants, including Noah, to continue the covenant with God. The story of Noah and the flood is widely known from Genesis, but the Book of Jubilees offers additional revelations about what occurred before and after the flood. In Jubilees, the focus is not only on Noah's survival, but also on the covenant that God established with him afterward, a covenant that emphasized the importance of purity, righteousness, and obedience to God's laws. Before the flood, Jubilees goes deeper into the depravity of the earth, particularly focusing on the Nephilim, the offspring of fallen angels and human women. While Genesis 6:1-4 briefly mentions the Nephilim, Jubilees provides more context, suggesting that these giants contributed to the wickedness that led God to cleanse the earth with the flood. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way as well. Man as cattle and beasts and birds and everything that goes on the earth, all of them corrupted their way and their orders, and they began to devour each other. Jubilees 5:2. This moral decay was not just due to human sin, but also due to the influence of fallen angels who imparted forbidden knowledge and corrupted the natural order. God's response was swift. He sent the flood to wipe away this corruption, but he preserved Noah and his family because of their righteousness. After the flood, Jubilees reveals that God not only promised never to flood the earth again, he also established a new covenant with Noah that included specific laws about purity and sacrifice. These laws, which were later passed down to the Israelites, were meant to help humanity maintain holiness and avoid the corruption that led to the flood. One important detail in Jubilees is that Noah was instructed to observe the Sabbath and to follow similar laws that had been given to Adam concerning sacrifice and purity. This covenant marked a new beginning for humanity, but it also emphasized the importance of remaining obedient to God's laws in order to prevent further judgment. In Genesis 12, we are introduced to Abraham when God calls him to leave his homeland and go to Canaan. But Jubilees takes us back to Abraham's youth, adding a whole new dimension to his story. According to Jubilees, Abraham grew up in a family immersed in idolatry, his father Terah worshiping false gods. This isn't mentioned in Genesis, but Jubilees paints a vivid picture of a young Abraham who rejected the pagan practices around him, choosing instead to follow a single true God. And he said to my father, "Tell me, what is this idol which you worship?" And Abraham saw that it was an image made of stone, and Abraham burnt them in the sight of everyone and fled to the wilderness. Jubilees 11:16-17. While Genesis focuses on Abraham's obedience to God's call to leave his homeland, Jubilees portrays Abraham as a revolutionary figure who destroyed the idols in his father's house and took a bold stand against idolatry in his era. This act of spiritual rebellion laid the groundwork for Abraham's later role as the father of a chosen nation that would reject pagan practices and follow God's laws. One of the most striking differences between Genesis and the Book of Jubilees is the idea that Abraham obeyed divine law long before Moses came into the picture. In Genesis, there is no mention of Abraham being given any laws other than the covenant of circumcision in Genesis 17. However, in Jubilees, Abraham is presented as someone who already kept the Sabbath, performed sacrificial offerings, and followed other laws that are typically associated with Moses. According to Jubilees, these laws were not invented in the time of Moses. They had been passed down from the angels to the patriarchs, starting with Adam. Abraham received these commandments from the angels, and he was expected to observe them as part of his covenant relationship with God. and he was taught by the angels about what was written on the tablets of the heavens. Jubilees 12:25. Unlike Genesis, where Abraham's actions are seen as part of his personal journey of faith, Jubilees presents him as a participant in a cosmic plan. He was guided by angels, and the laws he followed were part of a divine order that governed both heaven and earth. These laws included the Sabbath and various purification laws that Moses would later codify. The covenant of circumcision is one of the most pivotal moments in Abraham's story. In Genesis 17, God tells Abraham to circumcise himself and all males in his household as a sign of the covenant. But Jubilees takes it even further, revealing that this was not just a symbolic act, but part of a cosmic law written on the tablets of heaven. According to Jubilees, circumcision is not just a sign for Abraham's descendants, it's a divine law that has existed since the creation of the world. This covenant was inscribed on the heavenly tablets, seen as God's blueprint for creation, containing all the laws that govern both angels and humans. And this law is for all the generations forever, and there is no circumcision of days, and no passing over of one day out of the 8 days, for it is an eternal ordinance ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. Jubilees 15:25. In Genesis, the focus is on Abraham's obedience to God's command, but Jubilees portrays this act as part of a much larger divine order. Circumcision is not just a physical sign, but a way to align oneself with the cosmic laws that govern the universe. The story of the offering of Isaac, known as the Akedah, is one of the most powerful moments in Genesis 22:1-19, where God tests Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac. Jubilees recounts this story, but with some added layers. In Jubilees, the test isn't just between Abraham and God, but part of a larger spiritual battle. According to Jubilees, the angel Mastema, a figure often associated with Satan, is the one who suggests this test to God, hoping that Abraham will fail. Mastema represents the forces of evil that are constantly seeking to undermine the righteous. The Book of Jubilees adds that the angels intervened during the offering, and that God allowed this test to show that Abraham's faith was greater than the temptations of evil. And I stood before him, and before Prince Mastema, and the Lord said, order him that he not lay his hand upon the lad, nor do anything whatsoever to him, for I have shown that he is God-fearing. Jubilees 18:10. This story in Jubilees introduces a whole new level of spiritual significance. It's not just a test of Abraham's obedience, it's part of a cosmic battle between good and evil. Mastema tries to lead Abraham to fail, but God's intervention shows that faithfulness will always triumph over evil. In Genesis, the story focuses on Abraham's personal test, but in Jubilees it's part of a larger spiritual narrative involving angelic forces and the struggle between good and evil. In Genesis 25:23 we learn that before Jacob and Esau were born, God revealed to their mother Rebekah that the two brothers would become heads of 2 nations, and that the older brother Esau would serve the younger brother Jacob. Jubilees expands on this prophecy, emphasizing that this was not just a family feud, but part of a cosmic design where Jacob was always meant to inherit the blessing and continue the righteous lineage that began with Abraham. Jubilees adds a layer of predestination, revealing that Jacob was chosen from birth to continue the covenant, while Esau was destined to stray from God's plan. The book even records that Isaac and Rebekah were given divine knowledge about Esau's rebellious nature and his descendants' future opposition to Israel. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 peoples shall be separated from thy bowels, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Jubilees 19:13. In Genesis, we see this struggle play out through Jacob's cunning and Esau's impulsiveness. But Jubilees explains that Jacob was always meant to inherit the birthright, and that his actions, though deceptive, were part of fulfilling a divine plan. One of the key differences in Jubilees is the portrayal of Esau, not just as a brother who lost his birthright. Jubilees stresses that Esau represents a lineage of rebellion against God's chosen people. His descendants, the Edomites, are portrayed as a nation that would rise up against Israel, fulfilling the prophecy that the elder would serve the younger. While Genesis mentions the animosity between Esau and Jacob after the birthright and blessing incidents, Genesis 27:41, Jubilees expands on this theme, suggesting that Esau's descendants would become a nation directly opposed to Jacob's lineage, the future Israelites. This is part of the larger cosmic conflict that Jubilees often emphasizes, the struggle between righteousness, Jacob, Israel, and rebellion, Esau, Edom. And Esau took his wives and his sons and all that he had, and he went up to Mount Seir and dwelt there. And Esau became a nation, and they oppressed the children of Jacob. Jubilees 37:1. Jubilees makes it clear that Esau's rebellion wasn't just personal, it was national. His descendants would become the Edomites, who would continue to have many conflicts with the Israelites, reflecting the spiritual war that began with their ancestors. One of the most significant moments in Jacob's life is when he receives the blessing from his father Isaac. In Genesis, this blessing ensures that Jacob becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. But Jubilees goes even further, emphasizing that Jacob wasn't just given a blessing, he was also entrusted with continuing the divine laws that had been passed down from Abraham. According to Jubilees, after Jacob received the blessing, God and the angels revealed to him the laws that he and his descendants were to follow. These included the observance of the Sabbath, the laws of purification, and the sacred calendar, laws that would later be codified in the Mosaic Law. Jacob is portrayed as the keeper of these laws, entrusted with ensuring that his descendants, the future Israelites, followed them as part of their covenant relationship with God. And the Lord appeared to him by night and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham thy father and the God of Isaac, the land where thou liest. I will give to thee and to thy seed, and thy seed shall be as the stars of heaven. Jubilees 27:23. In Jubilees, the laws Jacob receives are part of the cosmic order that governs both heaven and earth. The emphasis on Jacob as the inheritor of divine law elevates his role beyond just receiving the birthright. He becomes the guardian of God's eternal commandments, linking him to the heavenly tablets mentioned earlier in Jubilees. In the book of Genesis, we see the birth of Jacob's 12 sons through his wives Leah and Rachel and their handmaids. These 12 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, become the heads of the tribes of Israel. However, Jubilees adds a layer of divine order to the birth of these sons, suggesting that their births were not just the result of human relationships, but part of a predestined plan set by God. According to Jubilees, the timing and sequence of the births were divinely ordained to align with the sacred calendar. The book emphasizes that each son was born according to the divine schedule, making their births part of a larger cosmic plan. And the wives and the handmaids of Jacob bore him 12 sons, each one in his time appointed by the Lord, and their destinies were written on the tablets of heaven. Jubilees 28:12. While Genesis focuses on the narrative events surrounding the birth of these sons, Jubilees emphasizes that their births were written on the heavenly tablets, reinforcing the idea that the 12 tribes were part of God's predestined plan for the world. One of the pivotal moments in Genesis is the story of Reuben, Jacob's eldest son, who loses his position as the firstborn after committing a grave offense. Genesis 35:22. Jubilees expands on this event, emphasizing its spiritual consequences and explaining why Judah and Levi rose to prominence in his place. In Jubilees, Reuben's sin is framed as a violation of the divine laws that had been established long before his action is not only seen as a personal failing, but a spiritual transgression that disqualified him from leading the tribes. This allows Judah, the fourth-born, to emerge as the tribal leader and Levi to take on the priestly role, part of the divine order established by God. Because of his sin, Reuben, the firstborn, was not reckoned in the inheritance, but Judah was chosen to be the prince over his brethren and Levi for the priesthood forever. Jubilees 33:10. While Genesis mentions Reuben's being disinherited, Jubilees places a much stronger emphasis on how this event fits into the cosmic plan. Judah's rise is part of God's eternal law, and Levi is set apart for the priesthood, connecting their destinies to the larger spiritual framework governing Israel's future. In the Bible, the tribe of Levi is set apart for the priesthood, with Moses and Aaron descending from this tribe. Exodus 28. But in Jubilees, Levi's role as the priestly tribe is framed as an eternal decree. The book emphasizes that Levi's priesthood wasn't just a matter of tribal assignment. It had been established on the heavenly tablets long before the Levitical priesthood was formalized under Moses. According to Jubilees, Levi was chosen by God to be the spiritual leader of the tribes, responsible for ensuring that divine laws were upheld. His priestly role is depicted as part of the cosmic order, and he is given special responsibilities connecting heaven and earth. And Levi was set apart for the priesthood forever to offer sacrifices and to mediate between the people and God, for it has been ordained on the heavenly tablets. Jubilees 32:17. While Genesis and Exodus focus on the Levitical priesthood in the time of Moses, Jubilees emphasizes that Levi's role was part of God's plan from the very beginning. This makes Levi's priesthood not just a response to historical circumstances, but an essential part of the cosmic order that predates the events at Mount Sinai. In Genesis, Jacob's 12 sons go on to become the heads of the 12 tribes, and we see their journey unfold as they eventually settle in the Promised Land. But in Jubilees, the tribes are not just inheritors of land. They are portrayed as guardians of God's law, entrusted with upholding the divine commandments that had been passed down from Abraham and Isaac. According to Jubilees, each tribe carries a specific spiritual responsibility and is expected to adhere to the laws written on the heavenly tablets. The book stresses that the 12 tribes were chosen not only to inherit land, but to serve as stewards of God's commandments, ensuring that God's laws were upheld for all generations. And the Lord said to Jacob, "This is the law for your sons and their children forever written on the tablets of the heavens, that they may walk in it and live." Jubilees 29:6. While Genesis tells us that Jacob's sons became the heads of the tribes, Jubilees adds that they were also entrusted with the task of ensuring that God's laws were passed on to future generations. Each tribe plays a cosmic role in preserving the divine order, connecting their actions to the spiritual destiny of Israel. In Genesis, Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, motivated by jealousy over their father's favor. Genesis 37. However, Jubilees takes this event and frames it in cosmic consequences. According to Jubilees, the brothers' act of betrayal was not just a family dispute, but a grave violation of divine order, and their sin went far beyond what is described in Genesis. In Jubilees, the act of selling Joseph is described as a major sin against God's heavenly laws, and the brothers are warned that they will face divine retribution for their actions unless they repent. This is a key difference from Genesis, where there is more focus on the jealousy and personal failings of the brothers. In Jubilees, the brothers' actions have cosmic implications. Their betrayal disrupts the divine plan and puts them under God's judgment. And his brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and their sin was recorded on the tablets of heaven, for they violated the eternal laws. And it was ordained that their descendants would suffer until they repented of their great sin. Jubilees 34:4-9. This emphasis on the tablets of heaven makes their sin part of a larger cosmic order, linking the brothers' actions to Israel's future suffering in Egyptian bondage. Their betrayal set the stage for God's plan to redeem the nation of Israel through the Exodus, which was foretold in the heavenly realm. In Genesis, Joseph's rise to power in Egypt is portrayed as a result of his wisdom and his ability to interpret dreams. Genesis 41. However, Jubilees expands on this by explaining that Joseph's rise was part of a divine plan written on the heavenly tablets. His success in Egypt wasn't just because of his abilities. It was because God had predestined his role as a savior for the Israelites. Jubilees emphasizes that Joseph's rise to power was part of a heavenly design meant to create the circumstances leading to the Exodus. Joseph's destiny was to bring his family to Egypt, where they would eventually become enslaved and then liberated through God's miraculous intervention. And it was written on the tablets of heaven that Joseph would rule over Egypt, and that through him the sons of Israel would be saved from famine, but they would also be bound in Egypt for a time. Jubilees 42:2. In this way, Joseph's life is depicted as a cosmic event, with his rise to power serving a much greater purpose in God's plan for Israel's deliverance. Jubilees connects Joseph's success directly to the heavenly order, suggesting that it wasn't just a matter of luck or human ability, it was predestined. One of the most fascinating additions in Jubilees is the involvement of angels in Joseph's life. While Genesis portrays Joseph as having a close relationship with God through his dreams, Jubilees goes further by introducing the role of angels in guiding and protecting Joseph throughout his journey. Jubilees describes how angels were sent by God to watch over Joseph from the time he was sold into slavery, ensuring that he would fulfill his destiny in Egypt. These angels intervened at key moments in Joseph's life, protecting him from harm and ensuring that he remained faithful to God. And the Lord sent his angels to guard Joseph on his journey to Egypt so that he would not be destroyed, for his life was precious in the sight of the Lord, and his path was written on the tablets of heaven. Jubilees 34:21. This detail about angelic involvement adds a layer of spiritual protection to Joseph's story that is absent in Genesis. It shows that Joseph's journey was not just a series of fortunate events. His path was carefully orchestrated by God, with angels ensuring that he would rise to power and eventually save his family. One of the most significant differences between Genesis and Jubilees is how Joseph's life is connected to the Exodus. In Genesis, Joseph's role ends with his family settling in Egypt, but in Jubilees, his life is portrayed as a prophecy foretelling the future bondage and eventual deliverance of the Israelites. According to Jubilees, Joseph's rise to power in Egypt was not just about saving his family from famine, it was about fulfilling a prophecy that would lead to the Exodus. Jubilees explains that Joseph was aware of his descendants' future bondage, and that he played a role in preparing them for their eventual deliverance. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Do not fear, for these things are written and sealed on the tablets of heaven." Jubilees 46:9. This prophetic element is not as prominent in Genesis, where Joseph's death is portrayed as the end of his story. However, in Jubilees, Joseph's death is seen as a transition, the beginning of Israel's bondage, but also a prophetic promise that they would eventually be delivered from Egypt. This links Joseph's life directly to the cosmic plan of redemption, which would be fulfilled through the Exodus. In the book of Genesis, the bondage of Israel begins when a new Pharaoh comes to power who does not know Joseph and begins to oppress the Israelites. Exodus 1:8-14. But in Jubilees, this period of bondage is seen as part of a cosmic prophecy that was written on the heavenly tablets. According to Jubilees, God had foretold the bondage of Israel long before it happened, and that it was part of his plan to lead them to the Exodus and the giving of the Mosaic Law. This prophetic plan connects directly to Joseph's role in bringing Israel to Egypt in the first place. While Joseph had saved Israel from famine, their time in Egypt was predestined to end in bondage, which would ultimately demonstrate God's power in delivering his people. And it was written on the tablets of heaven that they would be oppressed in Egypt, and that God would bring them out with great power and mighty wonders, so that his name would be glorified. Jubilees 48:1. This makes Israel's time in Egypt not just a matter of historical events, but a part of a larger spiritual narrative, where their bondage and eventual exodus were predestined for God's glory. The suffering of the Israelites is framed as a necessary trial that would prepare them to receive the laws given at Mount Sinai. In Exodus, we see God acting directly to bring about the plagues and deliver Israel from Pharaoh's oppression. Exodus 7-12. However, Jubilees adds a layer of spiritual warfare to the story by introducing angels as key players in the conflict between God and Pharaoh. According to Jubilees, the oppression of Israel was part of a spiritual battle between the forces of good and evil. Mastema, a figure often associated with Satan, is portrayed as actively working to harden Pharaoh's heart and increase Israel's suffering. Mastema and his evil spirits were said to have encouraged the Egyptians to oppress Israel even more harshly, testing their loyalty to God. And Prince Mastema stood up against them, and he sought to destroy them by harsh bondage and to cause them to renounce their faith in God. Jubilees 48:9. In this way, Jubilees adds a cosmic dimension to the story of Israel's bondage, suggesting that it wasn't just a matter of political power. Spiritual forces were at work to undermine God's plan for Israel's deliverance. The plagues of Egypt were not only acts of divine judgment, but symbolic acts representing the defeat of Egypt's gods and the spiritual forces behind them. Jubilees also suggests that Mastema and his evil forces worked behind the scenes to prevent Pharaoh from releasing Israel, but that God's power overwhelmed them at every turn. In Jubilees, the heavenly tablets play a central role in explaining how the laws and the timing of the Exodus were part of God's eternal plan. According to Jubilees, the Exodus was not just a response to Israel's suffering, it was carefully timed and predestined according to the sacred calendar written on the heavenly tablets. The book emphasizes that the timing of the Exodus was connected to the observance of divine laws, and that Israel's deliverance was meant to bring them into alignment with the divine order. Jubilees explains that Israel's time in Egypt, their suffering, and the timing of their deliverance were all foreordained, and that God's actions were perfectly aligned with the cosmic timeline. And it was written on the tablets of heaven that on the 14th day of the first month at the appointed time, the Lord would bring Israel out of Egypt, for this was the day set apart from the beginning of creation. Jubilees 49:1. This detail is unique to Jubilees. While Exodus focuses on the events leading up to and during the plagues, Jubilees introduces the idea that the timing of the Exodus was part of a predestined calendar tied to the cosmic laws of the universe. This makes the Exodus not just a historical event, but a part of the spiritual structure of creation. The 10 plagues in Exodus 7-12 are a dramatic demonstration of God's power sent to compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites. However, in Jubilees, the plagues are given cosmic significance. They were not just divine punishments, but symbolic acts representing the defeat of the Egyptian gods and the spiritual forces behind them. Jubilees explains that each plague was intended to disempower the false gods of Egypt, proving that only the God of Israel had true power over heaven and earth. Each plague was a blow not only to Pharaoh, but to the spiritual rulers of Egypt, dismantling the forces of darkness that had sought to keep Israel enslaved. And the Lord sent the plagues on Egypt not only to judge Pharaoh, but to show that the gods of Egypt were nothing before him, for they were false powers that could not stand before the Almighty. Jubilees 48:11. From this perspective, the plagues were part of the larger cosmic conflict between good and evil, where the God of Israel defeats both the material and spiritual power of Egypt. Jubilees also suggests that Mastema and his evil forces worked behind the scenes to prevent Pharaoh from releasing Israel, but that God's power overwhelmed them at every turn. In Exodus, we see Moses receiving the laws directly from God on Mount Sinai, but Jubilees adds the detail that these laws were not created at that moment. They had been inscribed on the heavenly tablets long before Moses. According to Jubilees, the heavenly tablets are essentially a cosmic record of all God's laws, established from the very beginning of creation, and they serve as a guide for both angels and humans. Jubilees emphasizes that Moses was merely the human recipient of laws that had been preordained for all time. Therefore, the Mosaic Law is not just a set of rules for the Israelites. It is part of a divine order that governs the entire universe. This implies that the laws given to Moses were always meant to be revealed, and that their timing was aligned with the sacred calendar, and the laws and the testimony have been ordained and written on the tablets of heaven, created even before the foundation of the world, that they may instruct all the generations of the children of Israel. Jubilees 6:17. While Exodus focuses on the dramatic revelation of the law at Sinai, Jubilees presents it as part of a cosmic plan. The laws had already been written in heaven, waiting for the appropriate moment to be revealed to Moses and the Israelites. One of the most intriguing aspects of Jubilees is its assertion that the Mosaic Law was being observed long before Moses. While the traditional Bible portrays Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as righteous individuals, it doesn't specify that they had been given the full extent of the law. Jubilees, on the other hand, asserts that the patriarchs kept the Sabbath, performed sacrificial offerings, and followed many of the laws that would later be given to Moses. This makes the Mosaic Law not a new development, but a restoration of laws that had been passed down since the beginning of time. The patriarchs had received these commandments through divine revelation and through angels who guided them. For example, Abraham is depicted as keeping the Sabbath and dietary laws long before they were formally given to Israel. For Abraham kept the Sabbath circumcised his sons, and observed the commandments of the Lord that had been written on the tablets of heaven and the laws that had been revealed to him through the angels of God. Jubilees 16:28. In this way, Jubilees presents the law as an eternal code given to all the righteous from Adam onwards. Moses was merely the chosen one to transmit it in its complete form to the nation of Israel. One of Jubilee's most unique contributions to the narrative of the Mosaic Law is its emphasis on the cosmic calendar. In Jubilees, the observance of time, especially the Sabbath festivals and the Jubilee years, is central to the divine order. These laws about timekeeping are presented as part of the heavenly tablets, and adhering to them is seen as a way to align with the divine rhythms of the universe. In Jubilees, the solar calendar is emphasized over the lunar calendar, with a year consisting of 364 days. This system is seen as the accurate way to observe God's commandments, ensuring that all festivals and Sabbaths fall on their correct days. Jubilees warns that deviating from this divine calendar can lead to spiritual disarray. That is why the laws about timekeeping are so integral to the Mosaic Law. And the Lord said to Moses, "And write down for Israel the law concerning the Sabbath and the festivals, for these times have been ordained on the tablets of heaven, and you must observe them accurately, lest you fall into error." Jubilees 5:2. This focus on the cosmic calendar is not as prominent in the traditional Bible, where the Sabbath and festivals are mentioned, but there is not the same emphasis on their cosmic origins. Jubilees emphasizes that following this calendar is key to maintaining God's favor, because it aligns human lives with the divine plan. While the Mosaic Law in the Bible is given specifically to the Israelites, Jubilees presents these laws as eternally binding, not only on Israel, but on all generations and even angels. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that the laws written on the heavenly tablets are not just temporary guidelines for a single nation. They are eternal commandments governing both heaven and earth. In Jubilees, the laws given to Moses are meant to be observed by all of God's creation, including the angels who are depicted as keeping the Sabbath and observing the festivals of the Lord in heaven. This makes the Mosaic Law part of a cosmic order that extends beyond just humanity and connects the spiritual realm with the material realm. And the law that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai is eternal and will be observed in heaven and on earth. The angels keep the Sabbath, and the righteous will observe the commandments forever. Jubilees 50:13. This idea of eternal law is not as explicit in the traditional Bible, where there is focus on the covenant between God and Israel. In Jubilees, however, the law is depicted as part of the fabric of the universe, binding both angels and humans to God's cosmic order. In Jubilees, the future of Israel is not left to fate. It is part of a divinely predestined timeline that has been written on the heavenly tablets since the beginning of time. This timeline outlines the rise and fall of nations, the exile and return of Israel, and the final judgment that will come upon the world. Everything that happens in human history, from creation to the final judgment, follows the cosmic schedule that has been recorded in heaven. One of the unique features of Jubilees is its assertion that these events have been preordained and that nothing happens outside of God's divine plan. The book provides a prophetic overview of Israel's journey, explaining that their exile, suffering, and restoration have all been written in the heavenly records, and they must unfold according to the divine schedule. And all that will come upon Israel has been written on the tablets of heaven, from their rebellion to their redemption, and the time appointed for their deliverance has long been fixed. Jubilees 23:32. While Genesis and Exodus focus on specific events in Israel's history, Jubilees provides a broader perspective, showing that Israel's destiny is part of a much larger cosmic plan that has been predetermined. Jubilees places a strong emphasis on the role of angels throughout the history of Israel, but their involvement becomes even more critical in the end times. In Jubilees, God's angels are responsible for carrying out God's judgment on the nations, ensuring that His divine will is done both in heaven and on earth. As the end of days approaches, Jubilees describes how the angels will descend to separate the righteous from the wicked, gathering those who have remained faithful to God's commandments. The Book of Jubilees also introduces the idea that Mastema, the leader of the evil spirits, will be bound and cast into the abyss, symbolizing the ultimate defeat of the forces of darkness. And the Lord will send His angels to gather His chosen ones, and they will bind the prince of the evil spirits and cast him into the abyss until the time of judgment, when he will be destroyed forever. Jubilees 23:29. This depiction of angels as agents of divine justice adds a unique layer to the apocalyptic prophecy. While the traditional Bible speaks of angels in the context of judgment, see Revelation, Jubilees presents a detailed vision of their role in the spiritual warfare that will unfold in the end times. One of the central themes in Jubilees is the prophetic vision of Israel's redemption. The book emphasizes that despite Israel's rebellion and exile, God has ordained a time when they will be restored to their land and renewed in His covenant with them. This restoration is not just a political event. It is a spiritual renewal that aligns with the cosmic plan written on the tablets of heaven. According to Jubilees, Israel's redemption will come after a period of great tribulation in which the nation will be purified, the law will be re-established, and the people will once again walk in holiness, preparing them for the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. And the time will come when the children of Israel will return to the Lord with all their heart, and He will gather them from the nations and establish them in their land, as it has been written on the tablets of heaven. Jubilees 23:26. While the traditional Bible also speaks of the restoration of Israel, see Isaiah and Jeremiah, Jubilees adds the detail that this restoration is part of a predestined timeline with specific events already recorded in the heavenly records. In the end times, Jubilees describes the coming of a messianic kingdom, where a divinely chosen ruler, often understood as the Messiah, will establish righteousness on earth. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that this kingdom will mark the end of the current age and the beginning of God's eternal reign, where the law will be upheld and the righteous will inherit the earth. The final judgment in Jubilees involves the separation of the righteous from the wicked, with the wicked being cast into the lake of fire, where they will be destroyed forever. Mastema and his evil spirits will be defeated, and the Messiah will reign in peace and justice. This apocalyptic vision aligns with the apocalyptic imagery found in the Book of Revelation. But Jubilees places more emphasis on the role of the law and the cosmic order being restored, and the Lord will establish His kingdom on earth, and the righteous will reign with Him. For the law will be written on their hearts, and the wicked will be cast into the lake of fire. Jubilees 50:13. This messianic kingdom in Jubilees reflects a vision of a restored creation, where the law is fully obeyed, and the righteous are rewarded for their faithfulness. The final judgment brings the ultimate defeat of evil, ushering in an era of eternal peace. Jubilees doesn't just stop at the rivalry between Jacob and Esau. It extends this conflict into a prophetic vision of the ongoing struggle between their descendants. The book suggests that the nations that arise from Esau will continually oppose the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites, throughout history. This goes beyond the personal feud between the two brothers and ties into the idea of a spiritual battle between righteousness, Jacob, Israel, and rebellion, Esau, Edom. In Jubilees, this prophetic struggle is not just about territorial conflicts. It is part of the larger cosmic war between the forces of good and evil. The lineage of Esau represents the nations that would become enemies of God's chosen people, and this tension continues throughout the biblical history. And Jacob and his sons went down into Egypt, to Joseph, and the sons of Esau remained in the land of Edom, and from that day the enmity between the nations remained. Jubilees 45.3. This vision of an ongoing spiritual struggle reflects the broader themes of Jubilees, where the stories of the patriarchs are part of a larger cosmic plan, a plan that involves not only the family of Abraham, but the destiny of nations and the ultimate battle between good and evil. If you found value in this insightful exploration of the Book of Jubilees and its unique cosmic vision of biblical history, remember to share this video with others who might be interested in exploring these profound mysteries. By sharing, you help us continue to explore ancient texts and reveal the hidden layers of God's eternal plan. Don't forget to like, subscribe for more deep biblical stories, and join the conversation in the comments. Together, we can delve even further into these fascinating biblical insights. Goodbye. Goodbye.